What's up everyone, it's Q from RetroQ Gaming. This video is going to be more tech based rather than anything else because I think it's just a bit stupid and a bit silly, and I'll get into what it is and why I think so in a little bit. But first off, I'm usually all for advancements in technology. Granted, stuff like, VR, virtual reality, augmented reality, stuff like that it may not be the progression, it may not be where stuff ends up. It also may be where stuff ends up. For all I know, 6 years from now, we could all be using VR headsets or VR whatever, implants or some crazy shit as our base standard version of gaming, with the controller going the way of the dodo or some stuff. Could be the case, could not be the case. Either way, I'm all for advancements in technology and actual advancements of what would be the proper way to describe this? Advancements, reasonable advancements, if you will. Okay, that makes more sense. Or at least it makes sense in my head based on what I'm going to talk about now in a second. So, I'm not just a bum when it comes down to attacking technology or attacking stuff as being unnecessary or whatever. I'm all for the actual advancement of it. Big fan of John Carmack for the same reasons. So, one of the reasons I wanted to make this is CNET are being their usual technologically ignorant selves, and it's so stupid. Okay, so they're putting out there that there's a bunch of new technology coming this year. I won't say new technology coming this year. It's really ambiguous when you look at it that way. It's kind of misleading, but essentially they're going to be putting out both PC monitor manufacturers and consumer level TV manufacturers are going to be putting out 8K resolution TVs this year. Now, apparently the first monitor is going to be available at the end of March from Dell, and it's going to be, I think it was a 31.5 inch, I believe it was, curved monitor with an 8K resolution and a listing price of $5,000. So it's 5,000 US dollars, or approximately. It's an estimated MSRP of going to be $5,000. So, that's that. I'm going to leave that there. Now, and then we look to the alleged TVs that are going to start releasing in June and July. Now, that's backed up by the fact that HDMI 2.1, which will be capable of this kind of stuff, is going to be announced in sometime in around May, June, and then obviously the products are going to release very short after. So that's why those dates, the May, June, July stuff for the HDMI and TV aspect of it are there. I mean, chances are that monitor is just going to have DisplayPort anyway, so HDMI is pretty much unnecessary for extremely high resolution monitors. Now, real quick before I go any further as well, is if you remember a couple of months back, this also ties into the start of this video. I'm not against increasing resolution. In fact, I think it's one of the best things PC gamers can do to increase their actual visual experience and visual fidelity. For the simple reason is graphics cards nowadays are so powerful, they're literally wasted on 1080p. When you can get a graphics card nowadays that can max out all your settings at 1440p or something higher, some of them even do proper 4K, which I'll get to now in a minute, but they can still do all of that with all the stuff maxed out and maintain a minimum, never drop below 60 FPS. So that's why I'm a big proponent of actually upgrading resolutions when viable. Now, that's going to tie in perfectly to what I'm going to say in a second. So I'm not just completely baseless against this just because of what it is, but there's two main reasons I want to talk about this for, okay? One of them is going to be from the PC gamer side, which leads in or follows on from what I was just saying a second ago. So, my computer, I have a GTX 1080 Founders Edition. Extremely high-end graphics card. Second most powerful graphics card you can buy for a home PC. And on top of that, the one that is above it is like 10% more powerful. I'm not shitting on anyone that owns the Titan X Pascal Edition. I'm just saying, realistically, you're getting about a 10%, give or take, performance difference. Some games are higher, some games are lower, but you're looking on average about that. Now, my GTX 1080 will power every game I own at 1440p. okay, which is my screen resolution. It's the one I use here. And it will do that with every game, with the exception of one, because allegedly, what's that game? Deus Ex Mankind Divided is supposedly broken in some ways. Supposedly it's the MSAA that's actually broken. Not going to get into that part of it. But it can run every game I own with every setting maxed out, and at my native resolution of 1440p, 2560 by 1440, and never drop below 60 FPS. Okay? So when you're looking at what you can get from my card or from the next card up, the Titan X Pascal, when you look at what they can offer, and then you look at 4K, if you are willing to drop some quality settings to stay at 60 FPS, or keep the quality settings but move down to maybe 30 FPS, it's not, like, with the exception of those two reasons, it's not a viable option for PC gamers just yet. I realize that some games are exceptionally well optimized. I mean, we all know Doom runs like an absolute dream. I haven't played Battlefield 1 on PC, but I hear it also runs absolutely amazingly. But the fact is, the majority, and basically anything that's a Blizzard game, but anything other than those that I listed are basically not currently viable. So that's one of the reasons why I don't think it. And keep in mind, this is all coming from an extremely high-end PC enthusiast. My computer is nearly $5,000. I know, right? Nearly $5,000, and I still don't advocate that. I don't advocate the 4K thing because the PC technology, in my opinion, is not properly there yet. Sure, you can use like maybe a 1080, put on a really graphically intensive game, get 60 FPS when staring at a wall, and then you try to move and play the game, and even with G-Sync, the frame rate is just, and your monitor's resolution and refresh rate, not resolution, sorry, just your monitor's refresh rate is absolutely all over the place. So that's why I don't think we're there just yet. A perfect example to go in hand with that, a friend of mine who doesn't even have, well, as of a few days ago, he doesn't even have a computer anymore when it exploded. But he had a pretty low-end laptop. And everything, when it comes to technology, he is absolutely adamant about 4K, 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 4K. Your 1440p monitor offers zero benefit over 1080p. 4K, 4K, 4K. I'm like, wait a minute. I could have bought a 4K monitor and played all my games at 4K with max settings at 40 FPS going all over the place, or I could drop it down to 30 FPS with the best settings and just leave it at that, which I'm not willing to do, because I like a smooth, fluid gameplay experience with great graphical fidelity. So, because of what I have, and because of where technology is at the moment, I figure using a 144Hz monitor at 1440p, with an Intel i7 5960X and an EVGA GTX 1080 Founders Edition will give me pretty much the best experience that I can get, or that I can justify in my mind. Now keep in mind, I did buy this graphics card before the Pascal Titan X came out, otherwise I would have just bought that, but you get the idea. The performance ceilings are very similar. So when you look at that from a PC gaming aspect of it, I don't think it's, we're just there yet. Now, that's only talking about it from 4K, let alone 8K. Now, some people can argue, it's like, oh, well, people who will use these monitors, they'll be running workhorse PCs, not workforce. They'll be running workstations, with a bunch of, what are they called, not Titan, what is it? NVIDIA Quattros, and he's like, it'll be all for editing and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, sure, that is the case sometimes, but there are going to be, the media especially, because they're already doing it, are already doing this for consumer level stuff rather than professional level stuff. So that's why it can be a bit of an issue, and it's going to make even more sense right now as I start moving into the second big point I want to talk about, which will more focus on TVs rather than the actual PC monitor side of it. So we all know, let's look at TVs, okay? So HDMI 2.1 is rumored to be coming out in March, June, July, which heralds in the new release of these 8K TVs movies we're supposed to allegedly be seeing. Now, because of all that, okay, first off, yes, 4K is becoming more and more affordable all the time. There's no argument for that about me. If whenever I do decide to replace it, I have an old 1080p TV at this point. So when I do decide to replace that, naturally I already have my 4K display picked out. My monitor is fine. I don't have to worry about that. But we're going to focus mainly on the TV aspect of it for this one. So when you're looking at getting a TV nowadays, not we won't worry about an 8K resolution rating. 4K adoption rates as they are very low as it is. And there's several reasons for that. One is trying to explain and demo the picture difference between even if you put them side by side running the same kind of thing, it's sometimes usually not enough for some people. Now, that's all opinionated, so I'm gonna stay away from that side of it. When we're looking at, it's like, well, some people can see it and some can't. I'm not gonna bother about that, because at the end of the day, if you can't see it, there's no point in you spending the extra money on it. But 4K adoption rates are pretty low, even with the affordability of 4K as it is. As we're progressing further and further forward, there arguably seems to be little to no marketing whatsoever for a 4K Blu-ray player. Now, the only 4K Blu-ray player I can think of that I've seen advertised anywhere at all within the last 6 months is the Xbox One S. Now, the PS4 Pro and the PS4 Slim do not have UHD, there you go, I was trying to think of the acronym, UHD 4K Blu-ray players inside them, so it's only the Xbox One S. Obviously the Xbox One Scorpio is going to have it as well, at least I'd imagine so, why wouldn't it? But when you think of that, that's one of the only two that I ever see marketed anywhere within the last 6 or 8 months. I think I've seen one advert for a different one, I believe it was a Samsung one, and even at that point I only saw it online, it wasn't even a high-end massive push. On top of all of that, which will actually go hand in hand with it, is the amount of 4K Blu-rays and the amount of 4K content out there is very low. Even with services like Netflix, I don't know if Amazon or any of the likes of them, but let's look at mainly Netflix and even to an extent YouTube, obviously offer 4K content. The amount of 4K content they have in there, especially from a streaming service, is very low. And then obviously you've got bandwidth limitations and compression issues and video codec style stuff. But the sheer volume of 4K content is very, very low. And that's even when you factor in almost anything. When you factor in retail Blu-rays, there's very few 4K Blu-rays. In fact, there's only, out of all the places, I know this is just anecdotal because this is just my experience with it, but out of every place I've gone within the last 6 or 8 months, be it in the town I live in, or even when I travel up to Dublin and check out some of the bigger, more flagship stores and the better stocked stores, I think I've seen 1, maybe 2 4K Blu-rays anywhere. Without looking online, of course. But that's so small. That is so small. And they're usually even of big films, but there's very, very few, because there are plenty of films out there with UHD Blu-rays, but the amount of places that have them stocked and released is usually negligible. And I'm pretty sure one of the 4K Blu-rays that I have seen in person for sale was only because it was called the Ultimate Package Edition, and it came with I think it was a standard version of the Blu-ray, 3D version of the Blu-ray, 4K version of the Blu-ray, and a digital copy of, digital HD copy. So I mean, at that point, what the marketing is awful, for one, and then it's just the amount of sheer lack of content in general for people with 4K. Now, you can argue that, okay, people aren't buying 4K, so less manufacturers are making less content for 4K, and then people are not buying 4K beyond that because they see that manufacturers are making little to no 4K content. I'm not completely ignorant. Like I said, I do realize there is 4K content out there. There's very, very small amount of 4K content, and especially when you look at stuff over the last couple of years, where when would it be? It would have been about about 10 years ago, maybe 8 to 10 years ago, when the movie industry decided to ask everyone, after maybe only 5 or 6 years previously, replace all your movies. So all those movies that people had on VHS come the end of the 90s, the movie industry was asking them to replace them with DVD versions of the same films. Then 5, 6 years later, they were asking them again to replace them with Blu-ray versions of the same films. And now, about 8 years later, we're being asked again to replace them with 4K and maybe a couple of years from now, 8K Blu-ray versions of the same films. So you can see why it's pissing people off. You can argue that when it comes to, say, Blu-ray, the amount of content is there, but it's begrudgingly there for a lot of people. It's the same way with 4K. The content that is there is very begrudging to a lot of people too, and even at that, there's just not enough of it. Now, because of the 4K adoption, or the low rate of 4K adoption, the low utilization of proper 4K once it is adopted, because chances are there's a severe amount of people out there who have 4K TVs that are playing an Xbox One, a base Xbox One, not even an upscaled Xbox One. They're just putting a 1080p signal into it, or they're using their standard PS4 and just putting a 1080p signal into it, or they're using a 360, or they're using their Skybox or their TV box or whatever that only supports 1080p with no upscaling, and they're putting in their standard Blu-rays, and some of them are probably even putting in their DVDs and wondering, it's like, oh yeah, I have a 4K TV. This doesn't look very good, So even with all of that, and I'm going to touch on one extra little thing, just at the same point. The current specification of consoles and the current lineup of consoles we have, the Xbox One, the base Xbox One, supports properly only up to 1080p. And even then, it's kind of iffy. So it's not a 4K capable or 4K ready console. The base PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 4 Slim is in the same boat. You're looking at up to 1080p, and even then, it's kind of dodgy. The Xbox One S is in an arguably marginally better position, while it will only render the games at whatever resolution the developer sets them at, usually like 900p dynamic resolution or 1080p. While it can actually properly upscale them, which isn't a justifiable means of getting a 4K TV, if you ask me. Sure, it has the 4K Blu-ray player, that's different, that's understandable. But then you have the PS4 Pro, which is already struggling as it is with sub 4K stuff. Sure, there are a few native 4K games out there on the PS4 Pro, almost all of which are very, very non-graphically intensive. I mean, you're talking games like the Elder Scrolls Online, which is absolutely laughable to run, and you get the idea. So it's struggling as it is. The Xbox One Scorpio, we're not 100% sure of, because on paper it could technically be a 4K console. It's not out till the end of this year. We'll see how it goes. But the point is, no matter what you're doing, if you're consuming YouTube videos, if you're consuming streaming content, again, including YouTube and Amazon Prime if it supports it, or Netflix, these video streaming subscription services, if you're consuming consoles or movies in physical media form, the point is your options are very limited. Are they more expanded from what they used to be? Absolutely, there's no question about it. But it's still very, very limited for the amount of TVs out there and the amount of TVs bought within the last few years versus the actual people that are knowingly buying 4K ones for actual 4K use. And to those people, the amount of content available is even smaller. So you can understand why consumers are going to be confused, pissed off, and just fed up with it and not interested in it. That leads me to my final kind of closing point on this. So look back at everything I've said in this video in regards to 1080p, 1440p, dynamic resolutions, everything in between, the struggles of 4K ownership, of TV related consumption, and the struggles of 4K related PC consumption. And then you look at the fact that all these companies and all these manufacturers and all are going to try sell you an 8K TV, a TV that is 4 times the resolution of your 4K TV that you may have and not use properly because there's nothing really to do on it, or is TV that you don't buy because you have no use of it because there's practically no content for it. So you can see why it's going to piss a lot of people off. As well as, I can't wait 6 months from now when these things actually start getting marketed. I can't wait to see all these manufacturers, these same people who said that, yeah, 4K is the future, 4K is your next proper step. You know, when they come out and then say, well, you couldn't see that much of a difference with 4K above your 1080p. Here's 8K. This is the real new future. This is the real next step. We know we were wrong and we're sorry about the other one. Don't talk about that. But here we can now see 16 times the amount of detail in your pores and blemishes on your favorite porn star versus what you could only see on your 1080p screen. So you get the idea. It's going to be an extremely hard sell. I don't think we're anywhere near ready for having this kind of TV in general. And I think anyone who releases this product expecting it to sell, especially because it's going to release at such exorbitant prices, a perfect example is your Dell PC monitor that's coming at the end of March, which will arguably be cheaper than the actual retail TVs. It'll probably be considerably cheaper than the retail TVs. It just goes to show that anyone expecting to sell these, and then these manufacturers and their stockholders and their shareholders and their boards of directors are just going to be thinking, it's like, why aren't these idiots out there with their 9-to-5 jobs buying this technology? What the fuck are they thinking? It's just so stupid. We just do not need this technology anytime soon. If the amount of content, be it from physical, gaming, streaming, or PC hardware was capable of it, if that was all capable, that would be fine. If there was an actual number of content and hardware out there that could do all this and satisfy this, that would be fine. That would be a whole different story. Let's just real quick, I'm going to make one last quick off the random wall point here. But when you look at now this is just every Blu-ray out there, okay? Every high-end gaming PC and every Blu-ray that's already out there at the moment, and every console game out there at the moment, and every console piece of hardware, if all of that, the sheer amount of it that's out there at the moment, if all of that was even 4K ready, we would have a much bigger proper adoption of 4K, I think. Let alone if all of that was capable and properly prepared and ready for 8K, then it would be acceptable. The fact is, we're not even at the 4K point yet. We're not even anywhere. We shouldn't even be thinking of the 8K point yet. It's just ridiculous if you ask me. And I can't wait to see this flop for the next couple of years because it's bound to happen. It's not even up for debate if you ask me. So I've rambled on way too long. In fact, I was originally planning on this video to probably be like 10 or 12 minutes long, and now it's twice that. So let me know in the comment section below, do you think these manufacturers and research and development teams, do you think they're idiots? Why are they doing this? Or is it just because they can? Whatever it is, it's just idiotic. Do you think we're anywhere near this kind of, level of technology to be widespread, mainstream and available, or do you just think it's fucking idiotic because, if your 4K stuff is failing and low enough as it is, what are you thinking with an 8K version? Anyway, let me know anything related to this in the comment section below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You can follow me on Twitter. Details in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the rest of the videos in my channel. And yes, if you stuck around to right now at the very end of the video, this was all done with the footage intentionally used because of the high resolution nature of this video.